So let's imagine then we've started our business. We've told the taxman we're self-employed. We've got our name. We've decided to become a sole trader, and now we're growing. We're doing business. We're doing okay. And it gets to the stage that it's time to employ somebody. What do we do there?
Right. Well, this is the next big step.
Yeah.
When you take on an employee, you have to operate pay as you earn.
Okay.
So you have to register with the revenue again for a PAYE scheme, and that's the framework you have to use to pay people. Now there is some calculators on the revenue's website to help you do the processing of payroll, but more likely you want to use some software to do it because it's much easier and quicker. Essentially, when you operate PAYE, you pay people some money. You have to deduct the tax and national insurance that they have to pay from that money.
Yeah.
And you pay them the balance.
And then you pay, as the employer, you pay
the tax and the national insurance you've taken off them. You pay it over to the taxman. And you also have to pay employers' national insurance, so you have to pay a bit of tax on top of their earnings as the employer.
Yeah, yeah. So there are modules or software programs that can plug into to Xero, for instance, and just make payroll a lot easier.
You also, when you run a payroll, you have to actually submit it to the revenue before you pay people nowadays, which a lot of people don't realise. And they are actually there checking, making sure that the people you're paying exist and that they're in the system and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And in theory, they will actually tell you if there's a problem, and you should rectify it before you pay people.
Yeah. Yeah.
In reality, it all happens virtually at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's known as an RTI, a real-time initiative.
Because that's relatively new, isn't it? That's only in the last couple of years that's happened, and it's almost like the revenue are catching up with the rest of the world.
Absolutely, and essentially it means you have to use technology to submit your information, your payroll information, to the revenue every week or every month.
Yeah.
And it's the same with VAT. You can't file paper VAT returns anymore. They have to be submitted electronically.
It's all relatively easy though, isn't it, when you get used to it? Or, like you say, you can employ somebody like yourselves to do that.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember as well, when you're a sole trader, you don't have to pay yourself. Your earnings are known as drawings.
Yeah.
And that's money you're taking out of the business. Everyone you take on is an employee. If you're in a limited company, then in actual fact you are an employee as well, so you are subject to PAYE on anything you take out of the business. So you don't have drawings in a limited company.
Does that mean we don't have to pay tax on those drawings? How does that work?
Unfortunately, the answer to your question is you do have to pay tax on the money you draw out.
Never mind.
So if you make £10,000 of profit, you have to bear in mind that you can only draw out, say, £6,000 because the other £4,000 will be for tax and national insurance.
Yeah.
So you need to be careful that you don't draw all the profit out. Otherwise, you've got nothing left to pay the taxman.
Yeah. Don't you still have a personal tax allowance that would go against?
You do, yes. So at the moment, the personal tax allowance is £11,000.
Yeah.
And that means the first £11,000 that you earn is actually tax-free. So if that was the only income you had, then you'd pay no tax on it.
All right, okay.
National insurance is slightly different. The threshold for national insurance is about £6,000, and you pay national insurance on your earnings above that figure.
Okay.
The other thing that you need to be aware of is that when you start up in business as a sole trader or a partnership, the revenue don't catch up with you for quite some time. In fact, because you've got no accounts for the first 12 months, they don't know what you should be paying them.
Okay.
So in the first year, you often don't pay any tax or appear not to pay any tax. and then surprise, surprise, they catch up with you in year 2.
Yeah.
That's all normal, if you like. The system is not helpful because it doesn't actually encourage you to pay anything in the first year, but then you get this double taxing going on in the second year as they catch up with you.
Yeah.
So most businesses that fail in the first couple of years fail at that point when the tax is due, because they've spent the money.
Not thought
and
about
they
it.
haven't set aside any money to pay their tax. Quite often we will talk to new businesses and say, set up a deposit account, and for every £1,000 you draw out, put £200 or £300 aside.
Yeah.
To cover the tax and national insurance when it comes along later.
Yeah.
And in a similar way, so people often do that for VAT as well, because it's only paid normally it's only paid every quarter, but it can be quite a lot of money, 20% of your turnover.
Yeah.
And if you put a bit in the deposit account every month, then when you pay it, hopefully the money's there.
What else? Is there anything else that we should be considering when we're just right at the beginning of setting up?
Well, you've got things like VAT to worry about.
Okay.
But for most people, that's something for down the line. You have to register for VAT if your turnover is £83,000. Okay. So it could be many years before you get there.
Yeah.
On the other hand, for some businesses, particularly when you're selling things, you can quickly reach £83,000.
Yeah.
And you have to register for VAT within 3 months of reaching that threshold. So it's 83,000 over the past 12 months on a rolling basis.
Yeah, I remember that confused us somewhat when we were first, because I can't remember what the limit was when we first started, but we got there pretty quickly. And I was really worried that we were going to have to pay tax on the money that we'd taken already, and it was all very confusing. But in the end, it wasn't that confusing at all, just once we registered. And there's different schemes, isn't there, for
That's
VAT?
Right. Yeah.
So is there any part of the VAT thing that you've got high headlines that you can explain the different types of programs?
Well, very briefly, most small businesses will opt to go for cash accounting in their VAT, which means you only account for VAT as you buy and sell things.
Yeah.
Normal basis of counting for VAT is called an accruals basis, which means you recognise the VAT when you raise invoices or receive invoices. So the cash flow, the cash basis of accounting for that does actually help most small businesses.
Yeah.
There is also a fixed rate where you can cut down the amount of work you have to do by simply looking at your turnover, your sales, your revenue, and multiplying it by a percentage.
I think that's what we did at the beginning.
Yeah. Typically, it'd be about 12%, but it does vary depending on the industry you're in. It's a fixed rate, you can't vary it, and it could be anywhere between 4 and 14.5%. But you just apply that to the sales, and that's your VAT bill. You don't recover any VAT except on capital items, things like desks and chairs and computers that you may have bought, which are treated differently.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's a annual accounting as well, where you can actually opt to just do an VAT return once a year, and you pay on account based on an estimate which you agree with the revenue.
It does sound slightly more complicated once we start talking about VAT, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
And at the end of the day, you don't actually need to register for VAT if you don't want to until you reach that £83,000 threshold.
And that's the important thing there. We talked about earlier on about the perceptions of business. VAT registration or voluntary VAT registration is another way of making yourself look bigger than you are. Now, the revenue will register people voluntarily when their turnover is below 83,000, but you do actually have to put a business case to them to be able to do so, because they actually, believe it or not, would prefer you not to be registered and off the radar, if you like. They only want people who are genuinely trading above £83,000 to be registered.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and businesses who are selling mainly business to business, it can be beneficial to be registered early.
Yeah.
Businesses dealing with the public, will tend to put off that registration as long as possible, because you can keep more of your money that way.
Thank you very much for coming. Actually, before you go, you were telling me something really interesting about the percentage of business that goes on in the UK, how much of it is with small businesses and how much is with large businesses. I think it'd be very interesting for the BMTV nation to hear that. Well, can you explain that again?
Yeah, there are actually 5.4 million businesses in the UK, and half of those, about 2.7 million, are one-man businesses, one-woman businesses. There are only 17,000 businesses which are not defined as small or medium enterprises.
Yeah.
It's a tiny number.
So 17,000 of 5.4 million are considered big businesses.
Yes, and they account for about 10% of the business done in the UK.
Yeah.
And the rest is dealt with by the small businesses.
That's fantastic. It sort of demonstrates very clearly what impact small businesses are having on the UK economy.
Massive, yeah.
So makes me feel quite good and quite proud.
Excellent.
But yes, thanks very much again for coming in. I hope everybody has found that useful. From me and from Guy, thank you for subscribing, and hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Guy. That was brilliant. 12-year-old daughter, she said to me, "Daddy, do you know what a DAB is?" I said, "Yeah, digital audio broadcasting radio." I said, "DAB radio?" She said, "No, it's this." So I asked Megan in the office, "Do you know what a DAB is?" And she said, "Yeah, it's this." It's a dance move, maybe? Something like that? I don't know.
I would say to anyone watching this is have confidence in what you're doing. And I remember a big, like a revelation to me was kind of light struck me. And I was reading about a balloon artist and magician up in London who's charging, £1,000 plus for a birthday party.